By the middle of this century, winters and springs in Indiana are expected to get up to 20% more rain than any time in the past 120 years. The Purdue Climate Change Research Center says that's likely to lead to more flooding. But as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports, like many people living in Midwestern states, few Hoosiers have flood insurance.
We close at 5.
Deb Guffey has had enough. She and her husband Ray own Brown County Tire and Auto Service in Nashville. This February marked the third time their shop is flooded in the past 10 years. Outside, employees worked hard to get a customer's car out of the water. Inside, Guffey says the water in her office was more than 4 feet deep.
It came so fast. We tried to unplug what we could, and my secretary and I, Jessica, got shocked. And so finally, she just grabbed my arm. She said, "We got to get out of here."
Now the Guffeys are moving the shop to the south side of town to hopefully escape the flooding.
It's either that or close up.
The Guffey shop sits just inside the floodplain, but right now they don't carry insurance. Most homeowners' insurance policies don't cover flood, so you have to purchase it through the federal government. As of 2 years ago, a little more than 23,000 properties in Indiana were covered under the National Flood Insurance Program. That's less than 1% of households and businesses in the state. FEMA experts say historically, about 20% of flood damage claims would come from outside the floodplain. But that percentage is growing as rain patterns change.
So just because someone doesn't live inside of that special flood hazard area does not mean that they're not at risk for flooding. Low risk does not mean no risk.
We're in what used to be the garage, and where the concrete blocks are used to be part of the kitchen and the dining room.
Mark Steins thought his house on a cliffside would be safe. He lives just a few miles down the road from Brown County Tire and Auto. In 2001, heavy rains washed soil out from underneath the house, and it dropped 3 feet, sliding close to the cliff's edge. About all that's left is a footprint.
And then off to the left used to be the living room, which everybody in the family liked because it had a cathedral ceiling, and we had basketball goal inside.
Now Steins has a new house on a hill nearby, but away from the cliff.
I talked to my insurance agent before, and, "Well, you don't need flood insurance, you're up on a hillside." I said, "Well, that's what I think." But that's what happened to the original house.
So how do people like Steins find out if they should buy flood insurance? One way is to look at federal floodplain maps. Unfortunately, those maps are often out of date, especially with the changing climate. David Knipe with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources helps create Indiana floodplain maps for FEMA. He says FEMA is supposed to update its maps every 5 years, but Congress has to approve the funding to do it. So it ends up being more like every 5 to 10. And Knipe says that's just to get the project started.
The FEMA process that we have to go through to publish these maps is quite long and extensive. It can take 2 to 3 years at best.
Even if floodplain maps were more current, Knipe says they're only meant to show risks from things like rivers and streams.
However, there's also risks that aren't mapped with these maps, more localized flooding that you'd see like in a neighborhood if you had a large downpour over a neighborhood.
And Knipe says we're seeing that kind of flooding more often. Take, for example, the issues 2 neighborhoods outside Columbus have been experiencing. Amanda Burdine and her neighbors in Armouth Acres and Northcliffe suspect drainage tiles from nearby farm fields are sending water into their homes and yards during heavy rains. This spring, Burdine's home had standing water for more than 30 days.
You have no ability to take showers, wash your clothes, go to the restroom. There were people that had to be taken out of the neighborhood in trucks by family members and didn't come back for 2 or 3 weeks.
After the last flood in 2015, Burdine fixed the damage to her basement, where her 2 oldest daughters sleep, and bought 2 pumps to try to keep the water down. It totaled $25,000.
So in January, we paid off that debt, and we got flooded again in February.
Most Hoosiers qualify for flood insurance even if they're not in a floodplain, but not everyone can afford it. James Sink with FEMA says the average premium in Indiana is just over $1,000 a year. That's about the same amount the average Hoosier pays for home insurance. Most people who own a home in an area that floods would want both. But for Indiana residents like Amanda Burdine, they'll have to decide if the peace of mind is worth the cost.
We just don't know what to do next because we don't know what's going to happen the next time it rains. Do you fix it and cross your fingers, or do you not fix it and prepare for what will happen again?
Congress has until May 31st to renew the National Flood Insurance Program. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.